Hey guys, I'm John Setzler. Welcome back to the Kamado Joe Cooking Channel. Today we're going to start a rather long project, but hopefully this video will still only be 10 minutes or so. We are going to do a ham. We're going to cure a ham, we're going to smoke the ham, and we're going to put some beautiful flavor on this ham. And I want to have a look here. I want to show you what we're starting with. This ham is brought to us by Heritage Farms. This is a Cheshire Pork ham. It's a beautiful ham. This ham undressed weighs about 18 pounds or so. This is a full bone-in, skin-on Cheshire Pork ham, and we're gonna put the whole treatment on this. We're gonna cure it. I'm gonna take the skin off, and we're gonna use the skin to make cracklings with separately, which I'll also hopefully show you in this video. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cure this ham, and I'm going to use what's called the equilibrium technique. That's going to take about 30 days or so, maybe 32, 33 days to cure this ham. But in the video description, I will give you the procedure and the ingredients for a 10-day cure. So let's get started making our curing brine. Okay, I'm starting out my curing brine with a gallon of water here. I've already calculated that it's going to take me about 3 gallons of cure to completely submerge that big ham in one of my brining buckets. So I've got 2 gallons in the refrigerator to have it cold, and I'm going to make the brine concentrate here with a gallon of water. And I'm going to bring that water up to a boil, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to put in 250 grams of kosher salt and 115 grams of sugar, and we're just going to let that dissolve in there. And while that's coming up to a simmer, I want to show you the aromatics we're going to put in here. Alright, what I've got here is I've got 2 whole sticks of cinnamon, I've got 2 tablespoons of whole black peppercorns, I've got 2 tablespoons of whole mustard seed, I've got 2 or 3 bay leaves, I've got 2 tablespoons of whole coriander, I've got 1 tablespoon of whole allspice berries, I've got 1 teaspoon of whole cloves, and I've got 1 tablespoon of crushed red pepper flakes. And we're going to toast those to get those really started before we put them in this brine. We've got one more important ingredient that's going to be part of this brine. This is pink curing salt. This is the thing that makes ham taste like ham. And this is called Prague Powder #1. This is not like Himalayan pink salt. This is a special salt that contains sodium nitrite and sodium chloride. So this is a curing salt that's the preservative that actually is what gives ham its flavor. And like I said, I've got about 45 grams of that here. I've calculated this equilibrium brine with an online calculator on the Amazing Ribs website, and I'll give you a link to that calculator in the video description, and it'll show you how I used the size of the meat we have, the amount of water we're going to use to come up with how much of this to use. So as soon as that water comes up to a boil, we'll start the rest of the process. Okay, our water is almost up to a simmer, so I've heated up a pan here. We're going to toss in all of our spices and toast these until they become aromatic, and then we're going to transfer these over into the brining solution. Okay guys, these have become nicely fragrant, so we are going to transfer these over to our brine. Okay, our water is just about up to a simmer, so we're going to take all those spices that we just toasted and drop them in there. We're going to let it continue to come up to a simmer, and once it hits a simmer, I'm going to back the heat down, and we're just going to let it simmer for 5 to 8 minutes or so. Okay, I've let this simmer for 5 to 8 minutes. I'm going to turn the heat off, and we're going to set this aside for about 20 minutes or so to let it cool before we come back. Okay, I've let that cool, and I've let the temperature come down to about 160 degrees or so. So at this point, I'm going to put my Prague Powder #1 curing salt in there, and it'll dissolve just fine. And I'm going to continue to let this cool. I'm going to leave it out here for a while longer, but ultimately I'm going to put a cover on this and put it in the refrigerator, because we're going to want to completely chill that before we move on. Okay guys, I've prepped this ham. I've taken all the skin off, and I have trimmed off most of the silver skin, and I took my brining bucket and I combined my cold water and the concentrate that we made for this cure, and we are going to inject some of this cure directly into this ham to help speed up the process. So I'm just going to inject this at about 1-inch intervals, and I'm probably going to inject 2 to 2.5 cups of our cure directly into this ham. And I've got this whole thing injected, so now we're just going to put this in our brining bucket. And these Yeti loadout buckets, or whatever it is they call them, make really nice brining buckets. We're going to drop this ham right in there, and it's going to completely submerge. I'm going to put the lid on it, and this guy's going to go in the refrigerator, and it's going to stay there for 30 days. And like I said, we're using the equilibrium method here. It takes a little longer, but the advantage of this method is you'll never over salt your ham. So like I said, I'll give you the 10-day cure instructions in the video description. Okay guys, I got most of that skin off of that ham in one piece, and I've scraped all the fat that I can off the back side of this. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to cut this down into squares. Now that I've got these cut up, I'm going to get a pot of water on the stove and get it up to a boil, and we're going to slow simmer these for a while to try to render off as much of that fat that's left behind underneath the skin as we can. Okay, our water's almost up to a simmer, so we're going to drop these guys in here, and I'm going to let this go at a slow simmer for several hours. I'm not sure exactly how long. We'll be back to have a look at them when I think we're about ready. Okay guys, these have been simmering here for about an hour and a half, and they're about where we want them to be, so we're going to drain these off. Okay, I'm going to dump these out into a colander in my sink. And we need to let these cool, so I'm going to run just cold water over the top of these to get them started cooling. And I'm going to let them sit for 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so to let those cool down, because we are going to come back and we're going to take that fat off the back side of the skin. And after these are cool, I'm just going to take a knife, and I've got kind of my fillet knife here that's got a really thin blade, and we're just going to slide it up underneath that fat on the back side of this skin and take that fat off just like that. I'm going to do that for all of these, and I'm just going to toss them over here in a bowl till I get them all cleaned. Okay, I've got all these scraped, got them cleaned up nicely. Now the next thing that needs to happen here is you want to dehydrate these. So I'm going to use my dehydrator, but if you don't have a dehydrator, you can do this in your oven. Put these on a rack in your oven at about 200 degrees and just let them go until they've turned brown and they're very brittle. So it may take 7 or 8 hours for that to happen at 200 in the oven. So I'm going to put mine in my dehydrator probably at about 160, and I'm going to let it go 12 to 16 hours or so until they're brittle and done, and I'll show you what they look like when they're finished. Okay guys, these are dried. These things are fairly brittle. Now I had these in my dehydrator for about 18 hours at 160 degrees. And if you've done these in your oven at 200 degrees or somewhere along in there, they may be a little bit browner than this. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a paper towel and wipe off. There's a little bit of visible oil here. I'm going to dry those off as best I can. And I'm going to put these in a vacuum seal bag and put them away. And I'll probably keep them in the refrigerator until I am ready to deep fry these. Okay guys, our 30 days is up. This ham is cured, and we're not going to let that fly have too much. I'm going to put this on this drying rack over a half sheet pan, and then it's going to go in the refrigerator overnight, which is going to work out to about 16 or 17 hours for me before we bring this guy back out in the morning to cook it. I'm going to put together a little seasoning to go on it. We're not going to add any additional salt, and then we're going to build our glaze. Okay, it's time to fire up our Big Joe. I've got a fire lit in the center here, and I've taken 2 chunks of my cherry wood and broken it down into smaller pieces. And we're going to set up for indirect cooking. I'm going to set my heat deflectors in the low position on both sides. And then we're going to set the grill grates up high. And we're going to use the I command again today. And I'm going to set up for 300 degrees or so to start out this cook. So I'm just going to put my temperature probe a little off center over here. We're going to have to move it when we get ready to put this ham on. So we're going to fire up the I command and go for 300 degrees. Okay, I've got our ham out of the refrigerator, and the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take my knife and we're going to put some diamond scoring on the top side of this ham. Just about like that. That looks pretty good. And then I've made up a rub here that I'm going to give you the recipe for in the video description. This has just got some brown sugar, some ground ginger, and some ground cinnamon in it. And we're going to take some of this and we're going to massage it into the surface of this ham on the top, bottom, sides, and everywhere. And I'm going to finish up the first part of the prep here by sticking in some whole cloves in the intersections of these diamond cuts all over the top side of this ham. Okay, I've got the cloves in, and I've transferred this thing to my roasting pan, and I've set it up on a rib rack so we can take this guy to the grill. Okay guys, our grill's up to temp, so I'm gonna put this bad boy on. We're gonna move that temperature probe out of the way, set this guy right here in the middle of the grill, and I'm gonna put the temperature probe back in place and let the I command continue to run this cook at 300 degrees. And we're gonna let this go for an hour to an hour and a half or so, and we're gonna go inside, we're gonna make our basting glaze, and then in an hour or so we'll come back and start basting this. Okay, while that ham's cooking, we're gonna start making our basting glaze. And I'm starting out here with 1 cup of brown sugar, and to that I'm gonna add 1.5 cups of orange juice, and then we're gonna add about a half a cup or so of orange marmalade, and then I'm gonna pour in about a half a cup or so of Grand Marnier, which is an orange liqueur. It's gonna bring a really nice flavor to that. And then I'm gonna squeeze in about a quarter of a cup or so of honey, and about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and about a quarter of a teaspoon of kosher salt. And then I'm gonna shake in just a little bit of cayenne pepper, not a whole lot. And then I'm gonna take my whisk and I'm gonna get that completely mixed up. And then I'm gonna take out about a cup of it, and we're gonna use, this is really thin to start with here, but like I said, I'm gonna take out about a cup of it, and we're gonna use that as a baste early on in our cook. And then closer to the end of the cook, I'm gonna put this on the stove, and we're gonna reduce this to thicken it up a little bit towards the end so we can baste it on that ham. Okay guys, our ham's been going here about 3.5 hours or so. It's looking really good. The internal temperature is up to about 105, and we're going to about 155 or so. So I'm gonna start basting this now. I'm gonna hit it with some of our base that we just made, and I'm gonna come back when the internal temperature hits about 120 or so and baste this again. We're not gonna put a real heavy coat. That's about good, so we'll be back. Okay guys, we're at the 4-hour mark or so, and our ham is up to about 115 degrees internally. So I'm going to baste it a little bit more with our glaze, and this is going to be the last time I baste with this. What we're going to do now is we're going to take the rest of this glaze that's not this, that I saved out, we're going to put it over a little heat it up to a simmer and reduce it to thicken it up a little bit, and we'll use that to finish this up. And we'll probably come back and hit that when the ham reaches an internal temperature of 135 to 140. Okay guys, our ham is up to about 140 degrees on the internal temperature, and we're only going to about 155. So I want to put my final glaze on here. I have taken this sauce that we had left over, and I've tightened it up a good bit. I've reduced it by about half to thicken it up, and we're gonna pour a little bit of that on here, and that's gonna be our final glaze on this ham. And this sauce is just amazing. You can use this on ham, you can use it on any kind of pork you want to use it on. In fact, you can reduce it down like this and use it on ice cream. It's just absolutely delicious. So like I said, we're going to give this guy a final glaze here with this thicker sauce. Let this continue to cook till we get it up to about 155 or so internally, and then we'll be back to take it off. Okay guys, this ham is ready. Everything looks really good here. We've gotten up to 145 degrees internal, and that's where I've decided to stop. There's no reason to cook this any more than that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it off the grill, take it inside, and I'm going to tent this with foil, and we're going to let this rest for a couple hours. It's rested, so I'm going to slice some off of it, and we're going to have a look. Okay guys, this ham looks amazing. I want you to have a look at that. This thing's still nice and hot. It's still steaming. I don't know if you can see the steam coming off of that, but man, that thing is just extremely juicy inside. Have a look at that. It smells amazing, and it tastes amazing. If you haven't had the opportunity to do a whole fresh ham and cure it and cook it yourself, you got to give it a try. So there's our ham. And no, I have not forgotten about the pork rinds, so let's do that. Okay guys, the first thing we're going to do to make these pork rinds is heat up some oil. I've got some canola oil going here over my Camp Chef propane stove, and we're going to heat this up to 375. And I've got my pork skins here ready to go. These are the ones that we dried previously. You've seen that. So what we're going to do is we're going to cook a few of these at a time, and then we're going to move them over to a rack where we'll just season them. And this should go fairly quickly once the oil's heated up. Okay guys, after I cook these, I just move them over to my drying rack here. Let me get them out of the sun. And I've shaken a little bit of seasoning on there. Let them dry, let them cool, but these things are great right out of the pot. Give them just enough chance to cool where they don't burn your mouth, and enjoy these. So we've done the ham and we've done the pork skin, so that's all we've got for this video. Give this stuff a try and let me know what you think. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/KamadoJoe, and follow us on Twitter @KamadoJoe. And until next time, this is John Setzler with the Kamado Joe Cooking Channel.